Very, very, very good evening. This is the second part of the Sunday night transmission because it went on for, well, it's a long transmission, it's a long analysis, and no, it's not something I apologise for. I am very thorough, and I'd like to believe that the people of my town want to be educated and don't want things in 10-second or 20-second bite-sized chunks because I can't do them in 10-second or 20-second bite-sized chunks more than anything else because it's too much for me to explain that way. We'll carry on where we left off in a moment. The first thing I want to pick up on is that there was a special cabinet meeting this evening. It was hastily arranged. The media were excluded. I haven't been able to ascertain as to what that meeting was for, what took place, what it was to discuss. So I can only speculate on that, and I've shared what my reasons why I think it could have been on Telegram earlier on today. So go and have a look there if you want. I'm sure it'll come out. I'm sure it will come out. Probably not in the newspapers. If it'll come out in the newspapers, it'll only come out in the newspapers because it's something positive that the council want to spin. So that's that. I think it's potentially something to do with the disappearance of Chief Superintendent Christopher Bowen. Remember, that's Commander Bowen, the district commander personally appointed by the Chief Constable Watson to oversee Oldham. And the more that's coming out, the more rumours that are coming out, it appears he's been suspended. Now, if the most senior police officer in Oldham, and I say if the most senior police officer in Oldham has been suspended, then why is it not in the Manchester Evening News? Why is it not in the Oldham Times? Why has the council, Greater Manchester Police's partners, issued a statement reassuring members of the public that the communities of this town are safe? None of that has taken place. So I think it could be potentially to do with that. And irrespective of that, he has gone, whatever the circumstances, has gone under. This is another nail in the coffin for an out-of-control council and its criminal partners, of which Greater Manchester Police are one of, along with the Manchester Evening News and the Oldham Times and the BBC-funded local democracy reporter. So that's the first thing I wanted to share with you. As soon as I know more, I will let you know. The second bit I want to share with you as we start this evening is I tested something out on Telegram earlier in terms of transmission to see whether we could do a workshop on submitting complaints in a private space on Telegram. It's not going to work yet on Telegram. So what I will do is I will share what's known as an unlisted YouTube link on Telegram with those of you who want to participate in the workshop to submit complaints to both Oldham Council and also the Labour Party and possibly even the Conservative Party. So if you want to do that, you need to either drop a message to me privately and I'll share the link with you, or you need to post something on Telegram to say, yes, I'd like to be part of that on the chat on Telegram, and I'll make sure you get the link. Let's get started.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I stand to move this motion on the protection of children and young people, one of the most important and challenging issues that faces this council and the wider borough. 1 year ago, this council received the findings of the Independent Assurance Review on multi-agency responses to historic CSE. That report is a devastating read, and it lays bare the experiences of those vulnerable girls at the hands of evil, evil men.
Actually, it didn't do that. First of all, it didn't do that. She's saying it laid bare the experiences of vulnerable girls to evil, evil men. Grandstanding, complete lie, because it did not lay bare the experiences, because it did not take the testimonies. So within seconds of her speech, she is lying. If she's not lying, she's misleading, because it did not lay bare what she said. They covered it up. And Maggie Oliver afterwards has confirmed in black and white that they covered it up, because Maggie Oliver has clearly stated that Oldham Council prevented victims from giving their testimonies. There's no ambiguity from my part. That's what Maggie Oliver said. That's what the victims have told me. The survivors have told me. So for Arud Shah to claim what she's claiming as her opening sentence is an outright lie, or, in keeping with the song from earlier, a barefaced lie.
And boys. Nobody who reads it can fail to be horrified at what they went through, nor can they fail to be ashamed at the missed opportunities that were there to help them. Since returning to the council and taking on the leadership in May, I have made it my business to understand our progress since the publication of that report, having not been here when it was published. And we have clearly made significant progress.
They've clearly made significant progress since the report was published, but they have not published their action plan as a consequence of the report. When I ran organisations and there was any form of audit taking place, an action plan would follow with very tangible activities, outcomes, performance indicators, so on. None of that has taken place. So how can you measure progress if you've not published a document into the public domain detailing what was wrong, what you do to put it right, and how it would be measured? They're called SMART objectives. None of this is new. Specific, measurable, so on, so on. None of this is new. What you've got here is a Labour Party council who've got away with it for as long as they've got away with it, and with the greatest respect to all of you, because I have not been here to critique them the way I do critique them. So the first one is one lie, second lie, seconds into her speech.
But I've also made efforts to understand what more we can do, and it is clear that there is much more to be done.
So if there's much more to be done, what is the much more to be done? An evaluation, a performance indicator, some of that, some form of document would say, well, this is what we've done, this is what we need to do. And also, when you work in this environment, when you work in any public sector environment, sometimes the solutions you come up with, the activities you've come up with, you intend to have a desired impact, has not had that impact. So you know what you've done isn't the right thing to have done. That's no one's fault. You've tried something, but it hasn't worked. There's no suggestion whatsoever from Arud Shah that any of this has been done. And you can see she's just reading out a document, a motion. And this motion was prepared by council officers. It wasn't prepared by the Labour Party.
2 weeks ago, I attended my first meeting of the cross-party steering group on CSE. Its establishment was one of the priority actions following that publication. The scale of the child protection challenge we face.
The office a clear way forward.
Oh, sorry. My apologies. I've got a small screen in front of me and I'm trying to pause and play as we go along.
Nor can they fail to be ashamed at the missed opportunities that were there to help them.
So there's a cross-party steering group. A cross-party steering group of which no minutes have ever been published that I've seen. If any of you have seen any minutes, do tell me. There was no minutes that I've seen from this cross-party steering group, or indeed what the cross-party steering group steers, what its terms of reference are.
Since returning to the council and taking on the leadership in May, I have made it my business to understand our progress since the publication of that report, having not been here when it was published. And we have clearly made significant progress. But I've also made efforts to understand what more we can do, and it is clear that there is much more to be done. 2 weeks ago, I attended my first meeting of the cross-party steering group on CSE. Its establishment was one of the priority actions following that publication. The scale of the child protection challenge we face, both as our council and as our partners in GMP, was laid bare to everyone who was in attendance of that meeting.
So she admits that in the meeting she went to 2 weeks ago, the scale of the child protection challenges they face was laid bare at that meeting to both the council and Greater Manchester Police. So after 5 years After 5 years, here is the council leader admitting the scale of the cover-up and the consequences of their failures. That's what that is, an admittance, a consequence of their failures. And every one of you should take heart from that, because every one of you alongside me has suffered so much and continue to suffer as a consequence of refusing to remain silent to the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of our town's children. Now bear this in mind, because later on, even though she says this here, laid bare the scale of the challenge, laid bare, she says this here, later on, Labour Party councillors repeatedly used the term conspiracy theory. And the MPs, two MPs, stood in Parliament and called us racist, remember. Yet here is the leader of the council admitting the scale, laid bare the scale of the challenge. She said it very fast, and those of you who are not trained to pick up on this sort of stuff will have missed it. So the scale of the challenge has been laid bare.
Children in this borough, unfortunately, just like all boroughs, cities and towns across the country continue to be at risk of exploitation.
So she now also admits, forget the nonsense about other areas. It's not your place to talk about other areas, and I have never judged in my life. I refuse to do this, and I try and support everyone who I have any form of mentoring or managerial role over to not do this. You do not judge success by the failures of others. Never judge success by the failures of others. Yet here is what Arud Shah is doing, and also she's clearly saying that it is an ongoing problem. This isn't me misinterpreting anything. This is me just line by line, sentence by sentence, deconstructing and extracting key information from this hastily read out speech.
And that risk is because there continues to be evil, depraved individuals who seek to abuse vulnerable children and young people. And the abuse that children and young people face can take many forms.
So it's still going on, but now it can take many forms. And she goes on to list the forms. Now, when I worked in counter-terrorism, counter-extremism, we looked at the different risks. And we labelled each of the risks green, amber, red. Yeah. And we matched policies and practice interventions according to each of the risks. Where's that work, Arud Shah? It doesn't exist. This is a council that's out of control and a team of officers that are out of their depth. They have no understanding of what they're doing or how to go about solving this issue. No understanding whatsoever.
Online grooming, abuse within families and by those known to the victims, and also by gangs who carry out coordinated abuse of their victims.
She completely omits, in terms of the motives or the types of offenders, racially motivated crimes. The grooming gangs, the Pakistani rape gangs, specifically targeted white working class girls, and one of the reasons was because of the preconceived cultural notions towards white girls, working class girls. This is not me saying it, it's not racist me saying it, this is what the research and the evidence shows repeatedly. She omits that.
Our safeguarding staff work hard to protect children and young people. They're dedicated and they're committed. But that doesn't mean to say that we're complacent. And as a council and as a partnership, we will always look for ways we can better protect our children and young people.
Okay, so now she's shifting and saying, don't criticise our staff are doing the best possible. Now, if that was the case, one of the outcomes from the report itself, not from me, was that staff were too scared to report what was going on because they would be deemed to be racist. That's in the report, it's not from me. So what specific training has taken place on addressing that fear? Well, the only thing I can see is that the MP has called us racist for exposing it. And this council has not distanced itself from the actions of the MPs who've called us racist. So if the MPs are standing up in Parliament and calling people of this town racist and far-right activists, and the council remains silent, then how has this council supported its frontline staff to report these crimes when they are going to be scared of being sacked for being racist? Can you see my reasoning?
One of the many responses we have made to the review was the commissioning of keeping our girls safe.
One of the many commitments was keeping our girls safe, yeah? This is a poxy little organisation in complete irrelevance, small, insignificant council proxy. Now, if one of your key interventions was to fund keeping our girls safe, what did you fund them specifically for? And how much did you actually fund them? Now, my information is they funded them something like £20,000. £20,000 is not even a half-time salary of a project worker with on-costs. It's not even half-time salary. They spend more on donuts and their lunches before these meetings. You're judged by your interventions and how much you spend on your interventions. £20,000 is a pittance. Not only is it a pittance, when this work was done in Failsworth, and I'm not a fan of them, but the Failsworth Independent Party used their own allowances to fund keeping our girls safe. So the money the council committed didn't even scratch the surface. And keeping our girls safe had to go begging to the councillors. And in Failsworth East, the councillors gave up their allowances to fund some workshops. Now, keeping our girls safe have no specialism in this. They have no specialism in this. They have not made a single public statement and their staff are in hiding. And that's because they are nothing more than a proxy for the council, so the council can stand up and say this.
Since the publication of that report, having not been here when it was published. And we have clearly made significant progress. But I've also made efforts to understand what more we can do, and it is clear that there is much more to be done. 2 weeks ago, I attended my first meeting of the cross-party steering group on CSE. Its establishment was one of the priority actions following that publication. The scale of the child protection challenge we face, both as our council and as our partners in GMP, was laid bare to everyone who was in attendance of that meeting. Children in this borough, unfortunately, just like all boroughs, cities and towns across the country, continue to be at risk of exploitation. And that risk is because there continues to be evil, depraved individuals who seek to abuse vulnerable children and young people. And the abuse that children and young people face can take many forms, from online grooming, abuse within families and by those known to the victims, and also by gangs who carry out coordinated abuse of their victims. Our safeguarding staff work hard to protect children and young people. They're dedicated and they're committed. But that doesn't mean to say that we're complacent. And as a council and as a partnership, we will always look for ways we can better protect our children and young people. One of the many responses we have made to the review was the commissioning of Keeping Our Girls Safe, an amazing local organisation who support victims and survivors to provide independent help to anyone affected and to feed back to us what more they need. It was their input, Mr. Mayor, into that cross-party steering group that hit me the hardest. The amazing founder of COGS provided an exceptional presentation which, in victims' and survivors' own words, told us about their concerns, their needs.
So where is this presentation? Why is this presentation funded by the taxpayer not being shared with the public? Where is this amazing presentation? It's not on their webpage. So where is it? She's claiming COGS have worked with survivors of CSE who have come back with a series of recommendations. Well, how many survivors of CSE did they work with? What types of survivors of CSE did they work with? Because they're basing the entire motion on this. They're basing the entire motion on this research because they misled us, lied to us about the Maggie Oliver Foundation, because Maggie Oliver's confirmed she had no say whatsoever, no role, no involvement whatsoever, neither her nor her foundation. So they are making reference to this motion being established off the back of consultation or this presentation from the chief executive of COGS. The chief executive of COGS is a very small team, is a woman called Hayley Harewood. Hayley Harewood and her sister Claire Harewood, Nicola Pomfrey. So there's 3 COGS staff. And that's it. It is, isn't it, Gary? Where is this report? Where is this report?
And their wants. They told us that they just wanted to be heard. They told us that most importantly, they wanted their experiences to be used to make sure that what happened to them could not and would not happen to other children and young people. So this motion reflects the...
Okay, so she's saying they told them, the survivors via COGS said to this cross-party working group that they didn't care if those who raped them weren't brought to justice. They didn't care those who covered up what happened to them weren't brought to justice, and they didn't care those who failed them weren't brought to justice. They just wanted to be heard. Well, how are you heard if there is not a reaction to what you say?
Voices of those brave women and girls who wanted their experiences to help, and boys who wanted their experiences to help shape current practice, who wanted to protect children and young people at risk now.
So she's already saying, look to the future. Look to the future. There is not a chance in hell any survivor has said that. Not a chance in hell, and she will not be able to quantify this, and nor will she be able to quantify this via this COGS report. And they won't publish the COGS report. You should ask for it, Gary. You should ask for it as a Freedom of Information request, this COGS report. And indeed, I'll put up the email of COGS. In fact, I'll do it now. Just give me a second. I'll put up the email of COGS. They're on Facebook, by the way. 764A Oldham Road, Failsworth. Oldham is their address. I'm not sure what 764 Oldham Road is. Is that the Failsworth Town Hall address? They're on Twitter. Keeping Our Girls Safe at COGS1. And they follow me, it seems, at COGS1.
To be clear, this motion seeks to take our work to tackle the exploitation of children in this borough further than any other local authority across this country. To be clear, this motion seeks to take our work to tackle the exploitation of children in this borough further than any other local authority across this country.
Okay, further than any other local authority across this country. She states that. How can she quantify that? She can't. This is just another outright lie. Because how can you say you'll take it further than any other local authority in the country when you've not audited what every other local authority in the country has done? This is a policy officer writing bull.
We will be the first to create a Victims and Survivors Charter together with GMP and victims and survivors themselves. That outlines and commits us to the best practice in how we work to protect them and how we work to support them, and most importantly, how we seek justice for them.
Okay, how we seek justice for them. How does a Victims and Survivors Charter seek justice? The first time she's used the word justice. How does a Victims and Survivors Charter seek justice? Nonsense, isn't it? That's absolute nonsense.
We have asked the Home Office to back the third stage of the Greater Manchester Assurance Review.
Okay, so he now jumps to the asking the Home Office to back the third stage of the Greater Manchester Review. That's got nothing to do with this. That's got absolutely nothing to do with this, because the third stage of the Greater Manchester Review is not any specific to Oldham. The Oldham element, remember, was a bolt-on for the Greater Manchester Review. Ring fence and very, very specific. Can you see the jump? And why are they asking the Home Office to back it? It was commissioned by Andy Burnham as the Mayor of Greater Manchester and Police and Crime Commissioner. With his own delegated powers, he does not need to go to the government to ask them anything. They're looking to hide now. They're looking to hide and deflect.
Which will look at the effectiveness of current practice in tackling the exploitation of children across Greater Manchester. This work will challenge what we do today by highlighting best practice across the city region and by
highlighting best practice. There is no best practice across the city region. If there was best practice across the city region, children would not have been groomed and gang raped and failed. If your best practice is the equivalent of a 1-star rating in a chicken shop on Yorkshire Street, would you want to model yourself on the best practice of that? Of course you wouldn't. Of course you wouldn't. Do you see yet again the contradiction? This is just absolute nonsense. It's absolute nonsense, and it can be ripped apart, not by me, it can be ripped apart by a child. A child could rip all of this apart.
identifying any areas for improvement.
Identifying any areas, because there might not be any areas.
I'd also, Mr. Mayor, like to thank Maggie Oliver and her foundation.
So she's outright thanking Maggie Oliver and her foundation there. You can see it there. She would like to thank Maggie Oliver and her foundation
For the support that they have given to this stage of the assurance review.
There you go. That's the sentence. I would also like to thank Maggie Oliver for the support that she and her organisation have given to this stage of the assurance review. From that sentence, it is very clear she's not been misquoted. It is very clear she's not been misquoted. She is claiming Maggie Oliver's support in the work in Oldham, or the endorsement of Maggie Oliver in the work in Oldham. Have I got that wrong? If I've got that wrong, tell me.
Maggie has done more to drive awareness of the issue of CSE and its impact than anyone else that I could possibly think of, and her...
So she's aligning herself with Maggie Oliver by giving Maggie Oliver plaudits.
ongoing support for the work we are doing across Greater Manchester.
Her ongoing support for the work we are doing across Greater Manchester. Her ongoing support. Now, Arud Shah stood there as the leader of Oldham Council and speaking in the capacity of the leader of Oldham Council. For her to say the ongoing support of Maggie Oliver across Greater Manchester means Oldham. And Maggie Oliver has been clear. She has had no involvement in any of this in Oldham.
Is truly valued.
And how she truly values it. But Maggie Oliver's not worked in Oldham. She's not done any work in Oldham. In fact, Maggie Oliver, in a statement before the CSE Assurance Review came out, was explicit. She's only seen Oldham from afar and through the work of the support she's provided to victims. She hasn't worked in Oldham. She's clearly saying her council and the Assurance Review has Maggie Oliver's support. I'm not stupid. I'm not looking for things that aren't there. That's what she's stating, and that's why she's made reference to Maggie Oliver. Why else is she thanking her for? Exactly, Julie. Why else is she thanking her? Arud Shah, the leader of Oldham Council, is an outright liar. I know she's an outright liar because she tried to maliciously have me prosecuted and failed, and then ran away from giving testimony in court, where I'd love to have seen her explain the side effects of Botox as though something I'm responsible for. This is the most outrageous speech ever given by a council leader. This is worse than anything Sean Fielding has ever said. It is.
We're also urging government to quickly and completely implement the important recommendations from the National Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse.
So child sexual abuse, the national recommendations, well, the government commissioned that. It's for the government to implement that. What do you want to do? Send the chief executive to write another letter? They're trying to confuse us and combine this with something else.
Led by Professor Alexis J. Accepting and implementing these recommendations is the most important thing the government can do to support us in keeping children and young people in Oldham safe from sexual exploitation. This motion sets out a clear message. We're a place that protects children and young people. We're a place that tackles offenders, and we're a place that cares about victims and survivors.
There you go. We're a place that cares about victims and survivors, tackles offenders, cares about survivors. But we're not a place, remember she used the word justice, but we're not a place, it seems, that goes after those who failed them, those who covered it up. We're not that place, are we, Arood Shah? Because how many of your mates would find themselves in deep water if we were that sort of place?
This motion aims to move further and faster in improving the work we do, and I urge you to support this motion.
This motion seeks to move further and faster. Well, how does it go further and how does it go faster? How does it go further and how does it go faster? What specifically will it do? That means it goes further. And what specifically will it do? That means that children are safeguarded faster. It's just another cliche, isn't it? She's taking you for fools. She's taking you for fools.
And support our ongoing work to keep the children of this borough safe. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
See? Nonsense. Absolute rubbish. Absolute rubbish. That speech in itself should be reported to the Standards Committee on many, many points. Exactly, Steve. Breaching several points of OMBC's Nolan principles. Are you all still with me? Okay. Let's listen to what Councillor Shahid Mushtaq has to say. By the way, he's already called us racist. And he rejects a question on gay rights. Because asking the question is racist.
Thank you, Councillor Shah. Councillor Mushtaq to second.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I sat in this chamber last June listening to the findings of the Independent Children's Review, and I was horrified, appalled and ashamed at the opportunities that were missed to keep children safe. I was then, and am now, in my new role as Cabinet Member for Children and Young People, determined that we do everything we can to ensure those failings are never repeated. 1 year on, we have made...
To make sure those failings are not repeated, not to hold those responsible for those failings to justice, but to learn from the lessons of the past. That's what he just said. To learn from the lessons of the past. Do you hate him more than I do, Sharon?
Significant progress as a safeguarding partnership.
Again, he's claiming significant progress. But there's been no document, no report produced to demonstrate where the significant progress has taken place.
As a borough against these priorities. At the time of the report's publication, the Council set out its response to the findings, outlining its determination to work with Greater Manchester Police to bring offenders to justice.
That's Operation Sherwood, by the way. And the first action of Operation Sherwood was to threaten one of the survivors.
To provide support to victims and survivors of CSE, to provide reassurance about current practice, to ensure cross-party oversight and involvement in CSE assurance, and to raise awareness of child sexual abuse, how to spot it and how to report it. We have established a cross-party steering group which brings together representatives from all political parties.
So there you go again, a cross-party steering group. A cross-party steering group. How many times has the cross-party steering group met? What were its objectives? How has it been judged to have met those objectives? It's just nonsense. It's just absolute nonsense.
To receive updates on our current practice and on our work to tackle historic cases of exploitation. We have taken part in a Greater Manchester-wide peer review process of our current practice and holding learning events for professionals to implement locally the recommendations of the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse, or the Cllr report. We worked with victim support organisations and the police to develop a victim strategy.
So where is the victim's strategy? He's claiming Oldham Council has worked with the police to produce a victim strategy. Where's the victim strategy? Any of you seen it? I've not seen the victim strategy. Where is it? Where is it, Councillor Mushtaq? And how? Because if it's a victim strategy, it isn't just a document that's written. It has actions against it and measurements. How have those actions been measured, monitored? Where is the victim strategy?
Launched a helpline for survivors to seek help, report abuse.
Apparently there's a helpline for survivors to report abuse. Well, how many people have reported abuse on a helpline? Who's going to report abuse on a helpline when they've been systematically failed for decades? When they have reported the abuse? When they've been called slags and having made lifestyle choices? Who's going to report when this council, to this day, has not owned up to any of it?
We undertook campaigns to increase awareness of both the support available and how to spot and report abuse.
Okay, they undertook campaigns of of the support available and how to stop abuse. It's his words. They undertook campaigns. So what are the campaigns they undertook? What methods did they use? How many people did it reach? How do you know it was effective? What did you refer them to? How many people as a consequence took up on those referrals? I'm sorry, I'm not being pedantic, I'm being systematic. Because if I sent someone out to evaluate, those are the sort of questions I would have, and my trained evaluators would have dozens more very specific ones. He's talking crap, isn't he? He's talking absolute crap. Look at Barbara Brownridge. Look at Sam Al-Mdani. Look at, is that Diane Williamson behind him? They're not interested, are they? Look at Elaine Taylor. This doesn't stand up to scrutiny at all. You're right, Sheila. There are a lot of dipped heads whilst he is speaking. We know why. We know what that is a sign of.
Commissioned the amazing Keeping Our Girls Safe to offer independent advocacy and support for local survivors.
Okay, so they commissioned the amazing Keeping Our Girls Safe. How much did he commission them, Mushtaq? How many survivors did they provide advocacy to? Yes, Lee, his head in particular. He cannot make eye contact with anything in front of him. His own head is bowed down. Look at his head now, how it is, compared to how bolshy he was when he was calling us racist. Look at Barbara Brownridge. Just look at her sat next to him. Look at fist-pumping Elaine Taylor.
GM Police launched Operation Sherwood to seek justice for victims whose experiences were included in the review and also invested in its dedicated, specially trained sexual abuse and exploitation team to seek justice for any and all victims who choose to come forward. This motion asks the Home Office support for this third stage.
Okay, what's the third stage got to do with Operation Sherwood? What he should have been quantifying then, when he made reference to Operation Sherwood, is how many victims came forward. You don't have to name them. No one's asking you to name them. There's no data protection here. How many victims have come forward? How many arrests have been made? How many people have been charged? 0, 0, 0. They've not arrested anyone, have they? They've not charged anyone. Because if they had, he'd be fist pumping and saying, we've made arrests, we've charged people. And you're right, Tony. If Sherwood had done anything, they would be bragging about it in the Oldham Times. And yes, Ian, the whole thing is meaningless.
Of the GM Assurance Review into CSE practice. This stage of the review brings together all 10 councils across the city region.
I'm sorry, I'm not interested in Bury. I'm not interested in Tameside. I'm not interested in Bolton. I'm interested in what's gone on in Oldham. They want to talk about an evaluation and best practice across all 10 local authorities. Does it look like there's any best practice here? Look at Barbara Brownridge. Head bowed.
Alongside GM Police to review independently our current practice tackling child exploitation. Mr Mayor, what this motion does through its content, updates since last year and forward actions is very...
What are its updates? What are the forward actions? There are none, are there? A victims charter. A victims charter. I could write that tomorrow. Load of bollocks. And for them to update their training so that counsellors know that they should report CSE. Like they don't know already.
Different to what some in this chamber are attempting through their motions and behaviours.
So he's blaming us for trying to hold them to account. Apparently we don't care about victims.
Last year's assurance review recognises the terrible, inexcusable failings of the system.
He, the little runt, Mushtaq, you little runt, you're blaming the system. There's no such thing as the system, you little runt. You runt of a counsellor from Alexandra, you're just a little runt. There is no such thing as systemic failures. People made those decisions to fail those children. People made those decisions to cover up their failings. People made those decisions to protect the rape gang members. They're not systemic failings. Those are failings made by people in positions of power. Were they mates of yours, Mushtaq? Is that why?
And the organisations that were there to protect those children. But rather than politicise, practical things have been done and continue to be done.
Rather than politicise, practical things have been done. If I didn't politicise it, nothing would have happened. Politicise. If we didn't politicise it, you and your Pakistani mates would have continued to cover up the Pakistani rape gangs, wouldn't you? What a runt he is. What a runt he is. Politicise. I call that campaigning. It's what this very democracy is based on. Fighting injustice, raising it and holding the politicians to account so that they do something about it. That's not politicising it. It's not something bad. Have I campaigned on it on a party political basis? No, the first thing I did was I went to Sean Fielding and begged him to do the right thing. I went to every Asian councillor I knew and begged them to do the right thing. Look at Barbara Brownridge's face. Look at her hands. But you can see, this would never have happened if we had not risked our lives, our livelihoods, our reputations.
To ensure that the same failings don't occur, that perpetrators are brought to justice and victims are supported in the best way possible. External victim support groups.
That perpetrators are brought to justice and victims supported. The omission is intentional. The omission of those who facilitated the failings. There's nothing there. Who facilitated the failings? Are those not crimes? I've maintained from the outset that, in my opinion, someone who facilitates and fails children who've been groomed and gang raped are at least as culpable as those who rape them.
Are now saying that the constant politicisation and grandstanding.
He is saying survivors groups are now saying that the constant politicisation. This should be a question submitted. Because how has he evidenced this? Which survivors groups? Which survivors groups? The plural. There's a plural here. I'm just going to rewind this so you hear this.
Operation Sherwood to seek justice for victims whose experiences were included in the review and also invested in its dedicated, specially trained sexual abuse and exploitation team to seek justice for any and all victims who choose to come forward. This motion asks the Home Office support for this third stage of the GM Assurance Review into CSE practice. This stage of the review brings together all 10 councils across the city region, alongside GM Police, to review independently our current practice tackling child exploitation. Mr Mayor, what this motion does, through its content, updates since last year and forward actions, is very different to what some in this chamber are attempting through their motions and behaviours. Last year's assurance review recognises the terrible, inexcusable failings of the system and the organisations that were there to protect those children. But rather than politicise, practical things have been done and continue to be done to ensure that the same failings don't occur, that perpetrators are brought to justice and victims are supported in the best way possible. External victim support groups are now saying that the constant politicisation and grandstanding of this issue is having a detrimental impact on the very victims they are allegedly campaigning for.
Okay, you've got it there. External victim support groups are saying this. Who are the external victim support groups? He's got to list them. He's got to name them. Who are they? Who are these groups? Who? Or are you just another weasel? Another lying scrote? I know what my money's on. I know what my money's on.
The recommendations that today's motion brings will build on that work and help build the confidence of victims, survivors and the public. It will push the continuation of improvement work needed to ensure the system is working for the children and families. If what you're looking for out of this report and any future reports is a weapon with which you can achieve political success for yourself, then I'm afraid you are not in the correct role.
Well, what about the fact that you and your mates have gained political support, politically gained from helping cover it up? It is my position that James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon and Debbie Abrahams received votes from helping cover this up. Is that just my belief?
You certainly should not be in this chamber. We should be fighting for the victims and survivors, not for ourselves. Please support the motion.
Point of order.
Brian Hoban puts in a point of order at the end. Actually, no. Good on him. At least he stood up and done it, hasn't he? At least he stood up and done it. Good on Brian Hoban.
Mr. Mayor, please. Can I have a point of order, please? I think he's accusing members in this place of politicising things and using it as a weapon to gain a seat. And I want that retracting. I want that retracting. It's disgraceful. It's a disgraceful statement.
Certainly I'm not. Mr. Mayor, I can repeat it if you want. I can hand it over.
You can retract it. You can retract it.
Certainly am not accusing anyone.
He is accusing. He was accusing. What else was he doing? If he wasn't making those allegations. If he wasn't making those allegations, what was he doing?
I say that openly, and I'll say it now in front of you. I'm accusing absolutely no one in this chamber of doing that.
I think that's been clarified, Councillor Holt.
It's about what's right, it's not about politics.
We have amendment. May I request, please, let member to speak so you can hear them. So I have amendment on this motion. Can I call Councillor Quigg to move and Councillor Arnott to second the amendment?
This is one of the most powerful speeches ever in this council chamber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The machetes are certainly out tonight for the opposition.
The machetes are out for the opposition. I'm sure that wasn't lost on Arooj Shah, the significance on that. The machetes are certainly out. Of course, Irish Immy has since gone on Neil Wilby's Facebook or Twitter page to attack Councillor Quigg, and Councillor Ross Birch is endorsing a man who's currently charged by liking it. There should be a standards complaint in for Councillor Ross Birch.
It's quite shocking, Councillor Mushtaq, what you've just said, really. You can't even bring yourself to apologise that this institution failed so many people. Many of them sat in the gallery tonight. And 12 months ago, just over 12 months ago, we had the assurance review presented, like the Politburo before us, by the Mayor, the Council Leader at the time, the Chief Executive and the Director, and then the Superintendent for Greater Manchester Police in Oldham, Chris Bowen. I asked two questions at the time, one on data and one on what the Council was going to do for people who had been employed at the time and whether or not any action was going to be taken against them. A year on, I'm still waiting for a reply from your departments, Councillor Mushtaq and others, and GMP. So it seems to me business as usual is very much on the cards. It's very much we're looking to the future, but not prepared to address the past. And that is where the problem lies, and why this amendment has been put down. because not one single public official who allowed people to slip through that net, who allowed people to go through the corridors, who allowed people to be picked up outside police stations, has been found, arrested or charged. And it is shocking that not a single council officer has been found guilty of any sort of misdemeanour or any sort of abuse of any process. It's a complete sham to say that victims are not wanting more. They want a public inquiry. You can see them here tonight putting signs up. You've got people shouting it from the gallery. A public inquiry can understand what really went on. And this denial by the Labour administration, this denial, this complete washing away as if a public inquiry is not going to do anything. Well, it does. It's done it in Rotherham. It's done it in Rochdale. It's done it in Telford. And yet again, Labour councillor after Labour councillor blocked it there, and they'll block it again tonight, no doubt. And this is the problem. The Labour Party continues to block it. And if that is how you want to continue in this way, then the growing calls from the opposition and others will continue to grow. And I know there's members in the Labour Party who are very well aware of that, and members who have actually called for a public inquiry. Yet they have been silenced. Silenced. Because it is politically inconvenient for the Labour Party, because it is a political inconvenience for this council, because it is a political inconvenience to look for the truth. And I am afraid to say, as the Home Secretary said so often, political correctness gets in the way of justice. And as a criminal barrister said to me very clearly, who prosecutes these evil people, justice delayed is justice denied. And the continued pushing down the road, the continued delays, the continued abuse of essentially not addressing their concerns as survivors is not going to achieve anything that they want. There's many commendable parts to the motion, but in the end, a public inquiry is what is needed. And it is about time you had the courage of your convictions, ignored the leader, ignored Jim McMahon, and stood up for what you believe in and said, back a public inquiry.
Ignore Jim McMahon. So Lewis says it there. Ignore Jim McMahon, because we know what this is all about. This is all about protecting the hamster-cheeked samosa nibbler. Because he, when a public inquiry comes, will end up in prison. I genuinely believe that. When a public inquiry comes, McMahon will end up in prison, or chased out of Failsworth by the very people who voted for him. And Lewis has said it. He's named him. He's named Jim McMahon. He's named Jim McMahon.
Can I call on Councillor Arnott to second it? Councillor Arnott, do you want to second it?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I rise to support the amendment proposed by Councillor Quigg.
Much calmer is Dave.
There's much in the motion that we support. Of course, we support the recommendation of the independent inquiry into CSE led by Professor Alexis J. It was a report commissioned by the government, and we expect the government to implement the report's 20 specific recommendations.
See? He's just basically said it. What are you talking nonsense for? The Alexis, J report, the national report, was commissioned by the government. It's for the government to implement the recommendations. It's their report. Of course they'll implement the recommendations.
We also support proposals to develop a victims and survivors charter, work to raise awareness, and to develop a mandatory duty to report safeguarding concerns, although I'm not quite sure why this needs to be done. Surely this obligation exists, and the issue shouldn't be that we should, it should be why we didn't.
There you go. A mandatory duty to report a child's been raped. Give over. That exists already. In law, it exists already. Anyone who works with children will tell you that's the duty bound. You don't need it to be mandatory. Spelt out. Oh, by the way, if you spot any children being groomed and gang raped, you've got to report it, even if it is one of your cousins doing it. Crazy. Absolute craziness. And he's doing it in his way. Dave's doing it in his way. And it's good.
It's a crime not to. Be clear, it's a crime not to.
See, it's a crime. Dave's saying, if you don't report it, it's already a crime. So why do you need it?
There is plenty to this motion, a long list of points to be noted, resolutions to follow, and lots of letters for the Chief Executive to write. Much of it is commendable, but the motion itself, on second or third reading, reveals the real direction the Council wishes to follow. The motion aims to direct focus firmly away from the Council's historic shortcomings and those of Greater Manchester Police and other agencies involved in the sickening legacy of abuse and the rape of young girls in this town.
See, they want to ignore what's happened in the past. They don't want anyone held to account. That's the purpose of this motion. They don't want anyone who failed these children held to account, held responsible. They've said it.
This amendment, while recognising the very real need to focus on support for victims and survivors and to get things right in the future, ensures that the failures of the past cannot be ignored, cannot be thrown in with a narrative that says, it was going on everywhere and we didn't do too badly, did we?
It was going on everywhere and we didn't do too badly. See? He's ripped it apart, hasn't he? Dave Arnott has ripped it apart.
Justice for victims will not be served until those whose criminal acts, duplicity or sheer incompetence on an industrial scale led to or allowed these crimes to go on for decades, undetected, undeclared and unpunished, are brought to account. We have called for a public inquiry for years, and eventually we will get one. We haven't changed our position, and we never will. No number of clever motions or initiatives, however well-meaning, will weaken our resolve. It took years and a change in council before Telford eventually secured an inquiry, and if that's what it takes in Oldham, then eventually I'm sure we will get there. I support this amendment. I urge councillors to do so for the very simple reason that it's the right thing to do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Spot on, wasn't he? Spot on. And he's got better, hasn't he, since he became a councillor? So he's now in his third year. I think he's got better. More confident, more assured. Yeah, Joe, go on. Done well, hasn't he?
Prior notification from members who wish to speak, Councillor Mushtaq, Shuttleworth and Councillor Bashwood. Can I just remind people, that members, that we have very limited time, so I would respect if you can be brief.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think Councillor Quigg was listening to my earlier speech. In my earlier speech, I spoke about the failures within the system that let our children and families down. I did not defend this council or the police or any individuals. I highlighted the horrors, the assurance...
You did not defend them, but you did not hold them responsible, did you? You did not name them. You did not say, we failed, and you did not apologise. This man clearly is not capable of an apology.
...review laid bare. We are all aware of widespread acknowledgement that the system failed for the very people it was meant to protect. Mr. Mayor, I have been cynical about the intentions of some in this chamber. Cynical because at times the debate has been vitriolic, it's been personal, it's been contradictory and hypocritical.
Is he talking about himself? Is he talking about himself?
The reason I use these words, the reason for my cynicism, is because I was seeing bullying, mistruths.
Bullying. Where's the evidence of bullying? Who's been doing the bullying? Who's been convicted in court? Irish Immy has been convicted in court. Who's been doing the bullying? It's your brother, wasn't it, Councillor Shahid Mushtaq, who made reference to my mother as a prostitute. My terminally ill mother as a prostitute, and shared her photograph. Is that not what happened, Councillor Shahid Mushtaq? Who's been doing the bullying? Is it Neil Wilby, one of your mates, that Arud Shah, Rog Birch, regularly liaise with? Who is doing the bullying? Playing the victim again. Playing the victim again.
Defamation of character.
Defamation of character? Where's the defamation? Where's the defamation? Your council is proven, you've just admitted it. Your council, you said systemic failures, I use different words. Your council is proven to have protected the Pakistani rape gangs. And you are a Pakistani rape gang protector because you fought against our campaign, and you continue to fight against our campaign for justice, which is a public inquiry. I'll say that to your face.
And outright lies.
Where were the outright lies? Every allegation we've made, everything we've released to do with the cover-up of the grooming and gang rape of our town's children has been acknowledged in the assurance review to have taken place. The shisha bars, the children being dragged off the street, the failings in the taxi system, the police is failing, Shabir Ahmed working for the council, having access to vulnerable children and being a member of the Labour Party. All of it has been proven to be true. If a single element of it had not been proven to be true, I would be in prison.
Individuals, including myself. Behaviours which are unacceptable.
Oh, someone's attacked him, including himself. I'm a victim. Oh, I'm a Pakistani victim. Oh, please, I'm a victim of racism. Oh, is Islamophobic? Oh, can't you see my brown skin? Oh, I'm a victim. Oh, me. I'm the victim here.
Acceptable anywhere and at any time, and behaviours that certainly should not be associated with the protection or defence of vulnerable children and their families. These are not behaviours one associates with a campaign to bring justice to victims of child sexual abuse.
Yeah. But whatever you think of us, Mushtaq, we've been effective, haven't we? Because we've got you snivelling there. That's it. Snivelling Shahid Mushtaq playing the victim. You can say it's the snivelling Shahid Mushtaq playing the victim.
Voices that are working with victims and survivors are now saying that the weaponisation of this issue...
So he's repeated it again, isn't he? Why is he, if he seconded a motion, why is he speaking again? It shouldn't happen this way. If he's seconding a motion, he should not be speaking again.
...is having a detrimental impact on the very victims and survivors it purports to be fighting for. Mr Mayor, the request for the outcomes of this assurance review have led to significant changes to how things were and are now happening.
What are the changes? Someone please list them. What were you doing before and now what are you doing differently? Just list them. Just show me a list. On the left-hand side list, these are the things we were doing before. This is what we now do differently. And if you had a third column, and this is the difference it makes. But I don't even want to push you to an impact assessment. Just list me. What were you doing before and what are you doing now? That's different.
Operation Sherwood has been mentioned tonight. This is bringing perpetrators to justice.
How is Operation Sherwood bringing perpetrators to justice? And you were the one that mentioned it. You're quoting yourself now. Well, how many perpetrators is it bringing to justice?
It is ongoing. Survivors have come forward and are being supported.
How many survivors have come forward?
Work to bring a victims and survivors charter, working with victim and survivor groups.
Who are the victim and survivor groups that you're working with? It's plural. You can see it's plural. Who are the victim and survivor groups that you're working with? Sorry. Sheila, you brought a smile to my face when that popped up.
Ensure that the correct support is being offered. The acceptance of the 20 recommendations of the National Review in the current Parliament, raising public awareness among young people and adults, and enshrining the mandatory reporting of child sexual exploitation into elected members' code of conduct. These are all practical things that will improve the system that let so many...
Improve the system. There's no such thing as the system. There are people. Individuals make decisions. There's no such thing as the system. The leader of the council is not the system. The leader of the council does not say to their press officer, go and kill that story. That's not the system doing it. That's the leader of the council doing it. The chief executive does not keep secret that one of the most prominent child sex offenders worked for the council and had access to children. That's not a failing of the system. That's a failing of the chief executive. And he doesn't want them held accountable because all of these individuals are linked to him and his party.
Many down all those years ago. My humble appeal to elected members across from me is to work together to build on the proposals and ongoing work to ensure we have the best possible environment for children and young people in Oldham, to ensure that all of us and everyone out there are the collective defence against the monsters that do exist. You have the
Well, the monsters are inside the council chamber. I'm sorry to break it to you all, but the monsters are inside the council chamber.
Opportunity to do the right thing. If you want a better system, if you want justice, if this is about them and not you, then let us work together. Let's take the final stage of the assurance review and ensure that all of us are doing everything for all of the children and families that need us.
Please allow members to speak. Please allow member to speak, please.
Doing everything for all of the children and families that need us to fight for them, not fight amongst ourselves.
We're not fighting amongst ourselves because you are not one of us, Mushtaq. You are a Pakistani rape gang protector along with your Pakistani rape gang protecting council, Labour Party. And Denise, not one of these will sit anywhere round the table with me because I would slap them silly. And of course I mean with my mind rather than my hands. Although James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon is going to have to sit next to me in all of the hustings coming up for the general election. And that will be entertaining. Won't that, Jim? Because I will call you a Pakistani rape gang protector from the outset and quantify it and evidence it throughout every husting you turn up to. And they'll have to invite me because I will be one of the key candidates on there. As for the bullying, Councillor Mushtaq's brother, who's apparently a trained kickboxer, along with Neil Wilby, has been repeatedly attempting to have me take part in some form of charity boxing match. I think I've demonstrated quite competently that my mind is far more powerful than their fists.
Please vote against this motion, this amendment, and come together for those that need our support. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
The moral high ground's too
Councillor
late.
Shuttleworth. Councillor Shuttleworth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I welcome this motion that offers us a clear way forward while prioritising survivors and victims in all that we do. I wanted to put on record again the response that both...
So that is the councillor in the back shouting she was one of them. So that is a councillor, a parish councillor claiming she was a victim of the grooming gangs. That's what she's shouting, isn't she? I was one of them. I was one of them. She's the wrong word. They. Let me get my pronoun right. They shouted that. And councillor is claiming they were one of the victims of the grooming gangs. And the blonde woman is not Howard Sykes' child, as someone has asked me. It is Councillor Harrison from Chadderton South, who we will defeat at the next local election.
Democrats and Labour politicians...
Can I please request...
There's a councillor swearing from the public gallery. That's a standards complaint. There's a councillor in the public gallery swearing. Is she going to be banned from the council meetings, Gary? There's a councillor swearing from the public gallery.
Can I please request, please respectfully let people to speak and listen to them, please. I think I've been very fair to everyone here in this chamber. Please let members to speak and conduct us the meeting. I'm warning you first time now. Please let us conduct the meeting, please. And I would appreciate silence and let people to speak.
I wanted to put on record again the response that both Liberal Democrats and Labour politicians have already had from the Home Office on the issue of last year's assurance review and on the issue of any public inquiry, because I think it's important to understand the full context as we debate this important motion.
So he now goes on a process of wanting to mislead you all to say the government said there's no need for a public inquiry or a rejected one. Clearly the Liberal Democrats aren't in control of the council, and it's not in their gift to ask for one. It's in the council's gift to ask for one, and the council never asked for one. Now listen to him. Listen to him manipulate.
Last year, the Liberal Democrats in this chamber wrote to the Home Office asking them to instigate a public inquiry. The response that they received from the Home Office Minister for Safeguarding, Amanda Soloway, would not do so. And there is the response.
Okay. Why would she not do so? Do you not think that matters, councillor? The why was the Liberal Democrats do not control the council. And it's for whoever controls the council to write to the government and ask for one. That little bit of information matters? Yeah.
In addition, I think it's vital to put on record that in debate in the House of Commons in June 2022, Home Office Minister Rachel McLean took a clear view on those that were seeking to undermine the integrity of those working to tackle CSE in Oldham and elsewhere.
No, she never. Not in Oldham. Where? I've gone and looked at that and I can't find it. It's in Hansard and I can't find it. I can't find where the specific reference is to those who are seeking to undermine the work of CSE in Oldham. Hansard is is where all these speeches are kept, and it's not there. The way he's trying to portray it's not there. He's just stood up lying. Now someone show it me, and I've gone looking. He's just lying.
When she said, "I can say from my position as a Home Office Minister that to call into question the integrity of the law enforcement professionals who dedicate their lives and careers to investigating these incredibly disgusting and abhorrent crimes, outrageous, it is completely wrong."
Okay. What he's just quoted is not in any way linked to what it claims it is towards. He's quoted something and says it means one thing when it never means that thing at all. He's a liar. He's another liar. He's another Pakistani rape gang protecting liar. And where's the reference to Oldham? You heard him say it. I didn't make it up. You heard him say it. These people, it's just fake news, isn't it? It's the equivalent of fake news. They just stand up and say what they want, how they want, irrespective of whatever bearing it has on the truth. So that's another standards complaint for this man. Because he won't be able to quantify it. He's just lied. He's just lied.
We have been told clearly that these issues are for us locally to determine, that we are responsible for driving improvements in local services for the good of local people. And we are seeking to do that with this motion.
So it's for us to locally solve it? Really? Well, let's go back to this. You talked about keeping our girls safe. How much have you funded them? My understanding is you funded them £20,000 or thereabouts. That shows how serious you take it. And yes, the comparison is £1 million for the football pitch at Oldham Athletic, a private business.
We take our safeguarding responsibility seriously here in Oldham.
They take their safeguarding responsibility seriously.
All 60 of our elected members are expected to take part in the safeguarding training, and I know that attendance is always high. So I'm confident that the Council has the right tools in place to make this a reality quickly, to empower members to support victims and survivors in the right way and ensure justice prevails.
Justice prevails. Where has he said anything about how justice will prevail in anything he's got up and said? Where in that motion is there anything about justice? He's just a relic of the past, isn't he? He's just a relic of the past. Just a loyal Labour Party dog.
And perhaps when Councillor Quigg stands up to give his right of reply, he can confirm whether he and his colleagues have actually undertaken the adult and children safeguarding training.
Why would anyone want to undertake your adult and children safeguarding training when your council, for the last 20 years, and every one of you who's took it, have ignored the grooming and gang rape of little girls? Who cares? Who cares? Because it clearly wasn't up to standard, because if it was up to standard, the contradiction is, if it was up to standard, you wouldn't be pushing for this mandatory motion to say, oh, by the way, councillors, if you spot any children getting raped, you've got to report it. It's explicit now. Mate, I wouldn't have told him to shove his leaflet. I'd have shoved one of his leaflets down his throat, is what I'd have done. He's just another Labour Party Pakistani rape gang protector.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Can I ask Councillor Bashwat, but can I also can I please remind that we're running really out of time, so Councillor Bashwat.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm really sorry, just 1 second. Let me just reply to the lady. These are the rules set by all these. These rules are all set by your political leaders. I have to just follow them. So if we have another interruption, I will have to adjourn the meeting. So I'm respectfully asking you, please let them speak, please. Councillor Bashford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm the last person to try and defend the police or the council or anyone who's failed, so I'm not going to do that. But I want to make the point that we should be having debates and discussions like this. It is healthy for democracy, and while we might hold different points of view how to achieve this, we're all aiming for the same point. We all want to improve people's lives and better protect people. But we shouldn't be using the tragic and horrendous experiences of the men and boys, the women and girls who have suffered abuse at the hands of evil people for political gain.
Where's the political gain? Since when was seeking justice political gain? Listen, we want a public inquiry. That's not political gain. If they supported a political inquiry, we go away. We're not politicians. Where's the political gain? We'll go away. Support us in a public inquiry and we go away. There's no political gain here. The only one that's... How much money do you earn, Barrelgate? You and your wife. Looking well as well, isn't he? Lazarus is looking really well, isn't he?
I'm continually appalled that there are people doing just that.
Who are the people doing just that? This man, by the way, today was engaging with Neil Wilby to attack me and then stop me from commenting on Twitter. He's a dickhead. He's a coward. He's a bootlegger. He's a liar.
People who are adding to the worry, hurt and anxiety.
What's adding to that worry, hurt and anxiety is you fucking piece of shit. You're a liar. Outright liar. And now you weaponizing little children to somehow say they don't want us to fight for justice. And that the council that failed them can be trusted.
Of those who have already been badly let down.
Who let them down? Who fought for them? Why is this even now taking place? If we hadn't done what we'd done, would this now be taking place? Would all this so-called drastic action that they've acknowledged now needs to happen, would any of it have took place if we had not done what we'd done?
Child abuse, any abuse, is not to be weaponised for political gain.
Who's weaponised it for political gain? You can see he keeps repeating this. Who's weaponised it for political gain?
There is nobody in this chamber who would tolerate or condone any sort of child abuse at all.
That's a lie. That's a lie. Because their own report proved it. Their own report proved it, that the motive was to keep it hidden from the public. Their own report proved that this council's motive was to keep it hidden from the public. It's in the report. And there's clear evidence of multiple times when they did that. They've even legitimised it. So he's living in some parallel universe. Living in some parallel universe.
None whatsoever. And there's nobody in this chamber who would not expect the more severe penalties the law can subject on those found guilty of these evil, horrendous crimes.
And nothing on those found guilty of covering up and failing the children. You can see it. Nothing.
That's not the picture some people are painting, though, I have to say. This isn't an issue to be tackled by casting aspersions, by coming up with conspiracy theories.
Conspiracy theories? What conspiracy theories? You're a bootlegger. It's not a conspiracy theorist. You're a self-declared bootlegger.
By encouraging false, outrageous and sickening claims to...
What are the false, outrageous and sickening claims? What are they? Quantify them. Quantify them.
Good people who would have nothing to do with it at all. This is not an issue to be treated as a mudslinging political race to the bottom.
We're not racing to the bottom. We want you to be. We want to raise this town out of where it is.
What this is an issue of is an issue that should be tackled by putting the survivors first.
By putting the survivors first. Well, how many survivors have you spoken to? What are the survivors groups? By putting the survivors first, and that's when he then continues to allude to Maggie Oliver.
By putting the victims first. By being sensitive and sympathetic to the survivors' wishes and needs, and ever mindful of the terrible experiences they've endured.
Called it barefaced lies, remember? His previous council leader, when he was forced to launch an investigation, their first internal one, that very weekend, he had his girlfriend pull up his ripped boxer shorts and share them online.
Any right-minded person will agree this is about real people's lives. Real people who have suffered and endured real evil. Any right-minded person will also agree to use these people's suffering to further a fleeting political game is all...
Who's trying to politically gain from it? They are politically gaining from covering it up, because the bloc Muslim vote that they are reliant on is controlled by those who, I think, are involved in the rape gangs themselves and members of the rape gangs. I'd love to see the intelligence report on Shabir Daddy Ahmed and his links within the Labour Party. And why hasn't this specialist unit from the government already been called in to investigate Shabir Ahmed and his Labour Party links? I'm sure he'd be more than happy to sing from inside prison after his Labour Party mates abandoned him, because I'm pretty sure he was of the opinion that what he was doing was sanctioned.
Just as disgusting as the crimes committed. So let's move forward. Let's move forward together. We all have the same aim, united in the shared goal of making sure this town, this council, the people in here, and the police force, the social agencies are all doing everything that can be done.
Let's move on and let's ignore those who failed them. Let's ignore your drinking partners, eh? Let's ignore you, because you were a councillor at the time, weren't you, Bashi? You were a councillor at the time, under McMahon, when the rape gangs were getting away with it. You were, weren't you?
Today and tomorrow. So, just to finish, the UK government are with us on this, and so's the highly respected Maggie Oliver Trust.
The UK government are with them on this, and so's the highly respected Maggie Oliver Trust. He means the foundation. But you can see there's no reference there to what he said on anything to do with the national inquiry. He's making very, very specific reference to the work locally and those who oppose them locally. And the victims want them to move on, want people to move on. So you know what he is falsely claiming the Maggie Oliver and the Maggie Oliver Foundation support them. And now he's been caught red-handed or red-nosed. He's trying to say we're misquoting him or misaligned him, and same with Arud Shah. They've been caught red-handed. They've been caught red-handed. He hasn't spoken to anyone, has he, Sheila? He hasn't spoken to anyone, has he? Lazarus. I'm of a mind. He's up for re-election next year in Royton South, isn't he? I'm of a mind to stand against him. I'm of a mind to stand against him, not because I want to win, but just to take the piss out of him everywhere. I'm of a mind to stand against him.
I hope everybody in this chamber can be with us together. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm going to ask Councillor Shah for the right of reply.
So they want to move to the vote. They're trying to force to move to the vote without giving Lewis Quigg a right to reply. That was Shahid Mushtaq and Elaine Taylor. You could see it. We've spoken. We're happy with that. We've got our words in, kill some time, and now we want to move to the vote.
Let's move to the vote. Second. They've been seconded. I'll second that. I'll ask Councillor Quigg for the right of reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, you've heard the reaction tonight from the public gallery, but you seem quite tone deaf to it. You refer to the Home Office letter that Councillor Sykes received from the Home Office, and in it says, obviously, to institute a public inquiry into the findings of Newton Ridgeway reports, etc., etc. It's clear for local authorities and individual towns which are responsible for delivering local services to commission local inquiries. So within that, this council can commission it, can ask for a public inquiry, can go through its own long reviews if it wants, but of course it is for local areas to learn from what happened in the past, not national government looking over the whole country, because they've got to take in a broader picture. But it's the problem with the motion, and again, there is commendable parts, as I've said, but the problem with the motion is that you are looking to basically say, but there's other problems in other towns, they're just as bad as each other. It doesn't mean that we've got to basically go and say, well, it's not for us really to address, but we're addressing it anyway. Oldhamers want Oldham to address the issues in Oldham. It is a no good, as keep saying.
That's it. Oldhamers want the issues in Oldham addressed, specific to Oldham. And what the Labour Party wants to do is hide it in a national piece of work. That, by the way, isn't focused on the issues in Oldham, because the national piece of work is not in any way linked to the grooming gangs, because the grooming gangs were excluded from that.
Well, we found it in 11 cases in review, but we need to, but is that it? Because it can't be the case that Oldham finds 11, but Rochdale, Telford and
Please let Councillor Quigg to speak.
Rochdale, Telford and Rotherham find thousands. And Councillor Bashforth, you say let's move forward. Well, you can't move forward unless you learn the lessons of the past. And this constant pushing, we want to move forward, but you can't move forward until you address the concerns of people who are survivors, who are sat in this gallery, as I keep saying, who are desperate to find the truth. Some still haven't got justice, nearly decades on. And is this the best we can say? Well, we'll pass it to national government, we'll get them to do it. Well, fine. But what are we going to do? What are we going to do to address the underlying problem? And it just seems that we just keep passing the buck. We can't keep doing it. We need to have this public inquiry. We need to have it because the people of this town keep calling for it, because there's a reason for it, because they can see the injustice. It isn't because people, and if I hear the word conspiracy theory again about this issue, I tell you what, it is shocking. Because to say it's a conspiracy theory, that this was a conspiracy theory, just completely devalues the bravery of these people who come forward. And I'll never forget that council meeting on the 27th of June. Councillor Shah, you weren't here, but I'm presuming you watched it back. An actual survivor came to that mic and said, I was abused in the early 70s and late 80s. And she was in complete tears. And this is where we've clearly got, we've clearly got gaps where people who have slipped through that net, who have been allowed to slip through that net, have not been addressed. Their concerns have not been addressed, and the assurance review only really assured Greater Manchester Police and Oldham Council that it found these cases and that there was problems in the period that HIT determined. And it is not acceptable. You are completely whitewashing genuine victims' concerns. And it is not acceptable to keep denying a public inquiry, because them concerns are getting louder and louder and louder. And you cannot keep ignoring it. And the tidal wave that will come your way. You had 3 council leaders go. How many more do you want? Because until you address that concern, it is not going away. And until you address the people's concerns, it is not going away. And until we get this public inquiry, it will never be addressed. And the victims and survivors will never go away. Thank you very much.
So I've been advised this is the end of the...
Okay. Boy did good, hasn't he? Boy's done good. Lad's done good. And remember, this is a councillor who's been followed home by Pakistani mobsters. And Arooj Shah has gone looking for CCTV footage in places he's been to see who he's been meeting with. That's right. The leader of Oldham Council has gone to venues looking for CCTV footage. What would the leader of Oldham Council want that CCTV footage for? To see who he's been meeting with, so she can send Irish Shimmy round? What? Goes to the vote.
End of time for this section, so we can move to votes only on the other amendments. So, Councillor Shah,
Mr. Mayor, is that right? Because I should be entitled to a response to the amendment.
Okay.
Is what actually true? That he was followed? 100%. Do you think I just make things up? The CCTV? 100%. I think by now, you should know I'm not in the business of making anything up. And there's no need to make anything up. A car was parked outside Councillor Quigg's house, who lives in the middle of nowhere really. 2 Pakistani mobsters who decided they were going to park up outside his house after he'd went home, ate their chicken and chips and left a bag of rubbish outside. These are the intimidation tactics that these mobsters use. Venues that Councillor Quigg has been to have been approached for CCTV footage to see who Councillor Quigg is meeting with. One of the people, at least one of the individuals, who've made such requests is Arooj Shah, the now leader of Oldham Council. This is gangster politics, people. This is gangster politics. This is what they do. This is what they do. And for those of you who say, oh, what about the police? Well, the police won't do anything, will they? Because the police are involved in the cover-up. The police are involved in the cover-up. The police are involved in the cover-up. That's why the government have to come in. Because the very institutions that should hold each other to account, the checks and balances, the police, the press and the politicians and the council, all 4 of them are joined together in this. If you joined us yesterday, you'd see that she wouldn't answer that question.
So this amendment does nothing but peddle the unhelpful and damaging narrative we've seen too much of, Mr. Mayor. Let me be absolutely clear. This council...
Asking for a public inquiry is damaging, according to Arooj Shah. That's what she just said. Look at her face. Just look how she's fuming. Look at her face.
...is delivering on its promises of a year ago.
Apparently it is delivering on its promises, and as she had her Botox done recently or something, she doesn't seem to be able to frown. There's no movement on her forehead. I'm finding it kind of strange trying to focus on her and make sense of it. There's no movement on her forehead.
We are improving how we protect our children and young people all the time, and we will work continuously with GMP every day to secure convictions of abuse.
We will work continuously with GMP every day, but we didn't know that the most senior police officer in Oldham, Commander Bowen, is no longer with us. I know it's illegal to share CCTV footage, Sheila, but since when has legality had any relevance to what these people do? I wouldn't know, Julie. I really wouldn't know.
and we are better supporting survivors and victims of child abuse and exploitation. The amendment also mentions Cllr LEWIS and the comments she's made on this issue, comments which have drawn criticism from every corner of the country.
Comments that have drawn criticism from every corner of the country who want to continue covering up for the Pakistani rape gangs. Exactly. Machetes will help secure the footage or the prospect of machetes. It came to me in the business I ran. I'd just give it him. It wouldn't be worth the hassle.
Safeguarding professionals, including the unprecedented letter from the NSPCC. I think suggesting that only one community is an issue here is dangerous.
No one has suggested only one community is an issue in the amendment. That wasn't suggested at all. They're playing the race card again. You can see she's playing the race card again.
It underplays the serious nature of abuse and exploitation that goes in every community. Nobody in this chamber...
See, he's not stopping her. He's shouting point of order and he's not stopping her. That's intentional.
Seeks to defend the failings that are outlined clearly.
What's your point of order?
The point of order is the quote that I've actually used is that Councillor Sharp seemingly refers to. She's not actually referring to the quote that I've quoted, so she needs to actually read what I've put before she starts making false assumptions and false narratives.
I really do not understand Councillor Quigg tonight. He's not listening to anything that's been said. I revert back to my previous thing about only hearing what you want to hear because you don't like the answer. So, including the unprecedented letter from the NSPCC, I think suggesting that only one community is an issue here is dangerous, and that's exactly what that quote referred to.
No, it didn't. What that quote referred to in terms of political correctness was the fear of being called racist. And Oldham Council themselves made reference to this because they made reference to community relations. They covered it up for community relations. It's in the email between Fitzpatrick and McMahon. And also, in the further documentation, they were apprehensive of the BNP who were campaigning.
And underplays the serious nature of the abuse and exploitation that goes on in every community.
Oh, apparently it now goes on in every community. Well, show me the grooming gangs in Oldham that come from the white community. Show me the grooming gangs that come from the Indian community. Show me the grooming gangs that come from the African Caribbean community. Show me. You get the picture.
Nobody, and absolutely nobody in this chamber is defending any of the failings that are outlined clearly in last year's report. Nobody in this chamber is covering up child abuse.
You are covering up child abuse because you're refusing a public inquiry. Because that report is time-censored, time-specific, and venue-specific. It's specific between certain dates, and it's specific to look at certain locations. If you at the time you said it was barefaced lies and it didn't exist, and you said, okay, we'll look at it at this time between X and Y time, and we'll look at it in these specific locations. You did not look at it in schools. You did not look at it in youth clubs. You looked at it in the children's homes, and you found it in the places where you said was barefaced lies and you were going to sue me and put me in prison for. And now you found it in those places. What you should have done is opened it up wider. To say, actually, the man's got a point. We might not like him, but he's got a point. It's true what is said. And at the end of the day, whatever you think of me, Arood Shine, whatever your friends think of me, I have a 25-year career in safeguarding children, in safeguarding communities, in protecting the very values of our democratic society. Now, whatever any of you think of me, those are the facts. I risk my life, my livelihood, my entire reputation, and everywhere I said it was happening has proven to be where it was happening. So what you now should do, if you weren't covering up child abuse, is open it up wider, and you open it up this way so it goes across a longer period of time, and you open it up this way so it looks at more locations. And if you wanted to do it three-dimensionally, you also go this way where you look at those who are involved in terms of roles and responsibilities. And until you do that, which a public inquiry would do, you are covering up child abuse.
In fact, not many of
Point
us
of
are
order,
working
Mr.
hard
Mayor.
to tackle it.
Point of order.
The reality is that this amendment is not meant to help anyone. It's quite the opposite. In fact, it's meant to confuse what is already a sensitive and complex issue. Thank you, Mr.
Sorry,
Mayor.
what's your point of
Mr.
order?
Mayor,
Please let me... What's your point of order, sorry?
point of order, Mr. Mayor. She keeps saying that I've said something in this motion, this amendment, which I haven't. So can Councillor Shah actually refer to where I said which particular community I've been victimising or outlining? Because according to this amendment, I haven't.
She's racialised it.
He quoted, the reference Swallow Bravermoon said that...
He referenced the Home Secretary. He referenced the Home Secretary.
Political correctiveness against communities was
Councillor
getting
Shah, you might not be well aware
Everyone
of the
is
quotation
well
system,
aware
but I
of
must
Swallow
point out that is
Bravermoon's
what
comments.
I've
Please
used,
take
so
a seat,
refer
board
to
members.
it.
Please take a seat. I'm going to move this to the vote. Those in favour...
See, the mayor was. We all said he's doing a good job. When it comes to it, he's backing up. He's backing up his Labour Party mates. He's backing up his Labour Party mates because Lewis Quigg was right in his point of order, and he should have told Councillor Arud Shah that she cannot make reference to race because Lewis Quigg did not make reference to race, but he didn't. And you can see the three white men around him getting more and more nervous.
Amendment. Sorry. Those in favour of amendment? Those against? Abstentions?
So look at the abstentions, and my understanding is the Liberal Democrats abstained. The Liberal Democrats abstained. I'm just going to rewind it 30 seconds.
The reference Swallow Bravermoon said that political correctiveness against communities was
Councillor
getting...
Shah, you might not be well aware of the
Everyone is
quotation
well
system,
aware
but I
of
must
Swallow
point out that
Bravermoon's
is what
comments.
I've
Please
used,
take
so
a seat,
refer
board
to
members.
it.
Please take a seat. I'm going to move this to the vote. Those in favour of amendment? Sorry. Those in favour of amendment? Those against? Abstentions?
You can see Helen Bishop at the bottom, blonde, brown hair at the bottom. The Lib Dems abstained. The scumbag Lib Dems abstained. They abstained on a vote for a public inquiry there, the amendment. Helen Bishop, the woman who keeps going on about she supported victims, is abstaining. That's your Saddleworth Lib Dems. You Saddleworth scroats. And sorry, I was in Upper Mill early having a meeting a friend of mine. But you disgust me. You genuinely disgust me. Hamdani and his Lib Dem snakes.
Amendment is lost. Vote on the original motion. All those in favour? All those against? Motion number 2, block lens surgery. And any abstentions?
So I've just cut this
Motion
out.
carried. Notice of opposition business. You have 30 minutes again. A call on Councillor Gafoor to move and Councillor...
Okay, so that's the end of the first bit. And let me just do this bit of the outrage. Okay, I'll just do this bit of the outrage.
Burn to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I rise to propose the opposition priority business as printed and speak briefly to it so as to allow as much time as possible for debate. This is a well-researched proposal, and I sincerely hope, Mr. Mayor, that we can discuss it in the spirit that it is intended. Today, we gather here to discuss a motion that is of utmost importance to the community and reflects the values of inclusivity, diversity and respect. I stand before you in favour of this motion, proposing the allocation of land for a Muslim cemetery in Oldham. This is a real issue that we face here today. There are no council staff available after a certain time to do the burials. The volunteer group would support this. It is disappointing. Excuse me. Well, let me talk, please. At the heart of this motion lies a fundamental. Excuse me. I'm sorry.
You can see the mayor has pressed that button to silence it. So the mayor's in control of that.
Councillor Gafford. Councillor.
Just let the mayor do it.
Sorry.
Mr. Mayor, I take great offence that the member of public has just said to the Tory member that she hopes his children get raped.
So there you go. She takes great offence, but do you see how they edited it out? And I didn't edit it out. I only got the footage off Nikki later. But she takes great offence to a member of the public saying that Councillor Gafford's children get raped. Of course, she didn't say that in the way Arud Shah has just manipulated it. And she escalated the situation. You can see what they've done. And sorry, people. This is just the Pakistanis taking care of the Pakistanis. This is all this is. This is just the Pakistanis taking care of the Pakistanis. And all of you who are playing politics with the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, just better get used to it. The Lib Dems will do it in Waterhead. You'll see the Lib Dems will do it in Waterhead, where they want to win. And they'll put up a Pakistani in Waterhead. This is what this town is surrendering to and will surrender to until we mobilise the rest of the town. And if we can't mobilise the rest of the town, then you might as well just surrender. She's manipulated that and she stood up to defend her Pakistani pal. And Eddie is clearly not in charge, is he, Lee? Eddie has clearly lost all control.
That is really offensive.
That is, excuse me, Councillor Gafford, sit down, please.
How dare you?
That language is totally
What do you mean, how
inappropriate.
dare
We will. We'll cease.
Eddie Mars is trying to. I mean, he's in trouble. Gafford's in trouble. Gafford should never have said anything back to a member of the public.
Please, may I request you to be quiet? Please, may I request you again? Please, may I request you to take a seat? Please, this is the 5th time I'm requesting you to take a seat. Please, I'm requesting you 5th time to take a seat. This is the 7th time I'm requesting you to take a seat. Please. Please, take a seat. Please, take a seat. Please, take a seat. Not at all. Not at all. I wouldn't remove you, but please take a seat. Would you please take a seat? Please, let us carry on with the business. Please. And I want justice, and I totally agree with you. Please, would you please let me carry on the business? Kindly take a seat. Sorry? Okay, I'm afraid I will have to adjourn the meeting. Can I ask the group leaders to come to the mayor's office, please?
Okay, so that's what happened there. And for those of you, Pauline, who's saying what did he say and what went on, I've played that video before, but here we go.
Lies are fundamental. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Please, I'm trying to stop. If you don't want to listen, you can leave. I'm the councillor. I've been elected to stand here. If you want to borrow sorry.
Get justice levied for never mind Muslim cemeteries. What about the children that are suffering? You don't use do that. I don't want your children get raped. And you have to talk them down on bridges. My son has stood on motorway bridges, hanging off the edge, right, because he was abused, right, because he wasn't listened to. And you want to cover it up. You lot should be ashamed. to. I wouldn't be paying time for here. I know.
Please, may I request you to, please, may I request you to be quiet. Please, may I request you again. Please, may I request you to take a seat. Please, this is the 5th time I'm requesting you to take a seat. Please, I'm requesting you 5th time to take a seat. This is the 7th time I'm requesting you to take a seat. Please. Please, take a seat. Please take a seat. Not at all.
You don't like what we're saying.
Not at all. I wouldn't remove you, but please take a seat. Would you please take a seat?
No,
please, let us carry on with the business. Please.
I want justice to my child.
And I want justice, and I totally agree
Yes,
with you.
we'll
Please.
get a proper inquiry.
Would you please let me carry on the business?
No, because you're not carrying evidence. You're more interested in Muslim cemeteries. If our children were Muslim, would you have a proper inquiry? Yes, you would. But no, it's Muslim men.
I'm not saying I will have children, I mean, they can have that room.
It's
So please,
Muslim
let's come to the mayor's office, please.
and you lot walk away. But we're going.
It's Muslim men that have done this to our children, and you lot walk away. Direct quote. If our children were Muslim, would you have a public inquiry? Yes, you would. But now it's Muslim men that have done this to our children. Muslim men that have done this to our children. You lot walk away. End quote. I am a Muslim man, and I'm filled with shame. And it's one of the reasons why I do this. There's no political gain in this. Right is right, wrong is wrong, and this is wrong. It's not too uncomfortable a truth for people in the community I was raised in. So they avoid it. Indeed, Sheila, we have to make them accountable, and I don't know how. I'm going to wrap things up here this evening. I don't know how. Because we're losing the momentum doing what we're doing the way we're doing it. I'm afraid. You all follow, you all see it. You all see the dwindling numbers. I'm also continuing to be exploited by politicians who take benefit and value from me, but once they get into positions of power, they ditch me as quickly as possible. And it's becoming a pattern now. So I don't know how. And the options I see before me, I find difficult. I find difficult. The fit motion later got voted down, and it got voted down without Brian Oban even allowed to speak. And that's because the Lib Dem motion before that, the Lib Dems waived the right to speak. So that followed through to the fit motion on a public inquiry. Brian Oban didn't realise, it's not his fault. But Sam Al-Hamdani and his team did realise, and they did know what they were doing. And that recorded vote, I think Lewis has put up on his Facebook page how that played out. But all Labour voted against it, including Councillor Aftab Hussain. So Bashford, who promised it, lied to you or misled you, you decide.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.